Welcome back to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for joining us. Well, since the recession caused cuts to fire department budgets, Reno and Washoe County have been operating in a deconsolidated system. Basically, that means in most emergencies, fire departments respond to you based on what jurisdiction you live in, not which resources are closest to you. And that's causing issues like slower response times. However, there are some talks underway to fix the issue. So I'm back with Washoe County Manager John Slaughter now. John, thank you again for your time. Okay, so the biggest issue here is that we have a bunch of different jurisdictions all operating kind of in the same area. Is it your opinion that consolidating into a regional fire service would be the best solution?
Well, I think it depends on, there's lots of definitions for regionalization. And I would point to Southern Nevada, where they have similar situation, actually multiplied several times of the number of jurisdictions they have. They're not consolidated. They operate under a system where they drop the boundaries, the borders. They don't, the closest unit will respond. And that's one way to define regionalization. I don't know if consolidation is the best answer. I think certainly some type of cooperation, collaboration, regionalization, if you will, is needed and will come.
How important would you say this is?
It's very important. So currently we're kind of in that system now with responding to fires, a fire event. And that was a couple sessions ago at the legislature. Senator Kekeffer basically said, you all have to get together, you're going to do automatic aid on fires. It didn't include emergencies, medical emergencies. So that's sort of the next step we need to tackle is how we're dealing with emergencies that relate to medical events, which is about 85% of the calls.
Right.
So it is important. We need to get this fixed.
Yeah, I think that's the big rub with that bill, that it only did cover fires, which is, depending on the agency, 10% or less
right.
of their calls. When it comes to Truckee Meadows, it's less than 1%. It's structure fires, at least. So so really, it's the medical and other miscellaneous emergencies that need to be addressed most urgently. But I understand there's kind of the ball rolling in making this happen. So tell me.
There is. The City of Sparks and Truckee Meadows Fire has recently entered into an agreement. They're going to basically in an area of that they've drawn, a certain area of their mutual areas, they're basically going to drop boundaries and say that the closest unit is going to respond not only to fires but also to medical events. And again, so I would point to that as a way of regionalizing a fire agency, medical response agency, if you will, that may not look like a consolidation. It's still, the outcome is still what we want to get, is where whoever's closest to whatever event it is the unit that responds.
Is everyone on board for this?
In Sparks and Truckee Meadows, yes, very much so. I know discussions are occurring between the City of Reno and Truckee Meadows Fire. Again, some issues that we need to work through on service levels. I think it's no secret the three-person crews that Truckee Meadows Fire has, the four-person crews that City of Reno has, is a bit of a barrier to in discussions, but it's something certainly that we're willing and both parties I think are willing to talk about.
Okay. Now, speaking of public safety, I want to touch on this really quickly, but the legislature mandated body-worn cameras for law enforcement officers in Nevada. So I know Washoe County has taken some steps to make that happen. Tell me about that. We have.
So again, another great regional type of a thing. The legislature has said, for Washoe County, City of Reno, City of Sparks, you must have body-worn cameras for your law enforcement personnel by July 1st of 2018. So that's a mandate. That's an unfunded mandate. But it also came with a possible, if the county commission takes the initiative, could implement an increase on our phone bills, which we call it our 911 fee. Currently it's 25 cents. The proposal will be to raise that to 85 cents per line. So if you have a cell phone, it's going to be it could be up to 85 cents a month. That would help fund body cameras in all three jurisdictions. So Reno, Sparks, Washoe County, law enforcement agencies would all benefit from that fee increase. I don't think there's any argument that body cameras are needed. We see this nationwide where it's assisted in all sorts of things, both for the safety of not only the general public, but also our law enforcement officers. So body cameras will occur on July 1st. And Washoe County Commission has taken the first steps in funding that through our phone lines fees.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I want to pivot a little bit and talk about housing. This is the big issue in our region right now, and almost nobody is untouched by the housing shortage. Just to start us off, is there anything within the power of the county to help the public with this affordable housing crisis? Or I mean, I know it's largely dictated by the market, which you can't regulate, but is there anything you can do?
There is, and there are strategies that we're looking at. So part of the issue is related to the number of housing units that we have. So the faster new housing can get on the market, the better. So we are looking at ways that we can improve our processes so that when developers come in and we're proposing projects, that we can get them through that process as quickly as possible. Removing those kinds of barriers, removing restrictions on that relate to things like availability of water. There's water available. If they have everything else lined up, let's get them through the process. Certainly, if there's issues, then certainly we wouldn't go through quite as fast. But as long as everything's lined up, let's get them through the process. Let's get this housing stock on the market as quickly as possible.
Okay, and then I know that for the city at least, subsidizing developments is a possibility if it's a development that meets some kind of need. Does the county ever subsidize?
Not to that term. Again, it's how do we reduce their costs. One of the things that we're looking at is sewer connection and sewer connection fees, water connections, those kinds of fees that come along with development of housing. Looking at, are there ways that we can reduce those costs for the developers so that then can be passed on to the public who are purchasing the homes and moving into those homes.
Right, and reducing those costs is super important because as we've seen, we have a pretty big population that's kind of on the bubble of barely being able to afford their housing, and when rents go up, as we've seen them go up consistently over the last few years, they can no longer afford it, and we end up with a new batch of homeless. Which is now overcrowding and overfilling our homeless shelters. So I know that there have been some talks about building a new homeless shelter or supplementing. Where are we with that now?
So the homeless shelter is owned, operated by the city of Reno. Certainly the county funds a large portion of that. There are some issues related to how many shelters we can have in the city of Reno. There's discussions that are going on that. I know there's overflow shelter discussion. Certainly we're working with the city on that issue. One of the things that is new to the region is a new, we call it the Community Homeless Advisory Board. It was previously a governing board that dealt only with the operation of the homeless shelter, only looked at that. They'll be expanding their view to say all homeless issues, sort of for the region. It's really a first for us, and for the entire region, a board that will be looking at all homeless issues. One of their first goals is to develop, that plan of how many shelters we have, where are they located, how many more do we need, where do we find the funding for that.
Best case scenario, say you have all the resources you need, you can wave a magic wand. What would the system look like for homeless shelters? Homelessness is such a complicated issue because of all the factors that are involved. I would point to one of our very successful programs, our Crossroads program, which is a transitional shelter program that wraps all services around those individuals. So not only is it providing a shelter at night, but there's on-site counseling, there's on-site alcohol and drug counseling, there's job counseling, there's all sorts of systems that are in that system, not just housing somebody for the night, but really getting them to a point where they're successful, they can move on and be successful. So what's that going to take to get that?
It's a funding issue in part. It's also, quite frankly, it's also talking about a shelter and a need for a shelter. Our Crossroads program is bursting at the seams. We need more space for that. We've just recently opened through a extremely interesting partnership with Grace Church. We've just opened a new home for women that are in our Crossroads program. It's really comes down to space. So the services and also the space are the two things that we need to fund.
Okay. What else do we need other than space? Sometimes people like to help. What do we need from the community?
I think from the community, again, just a knowledge that homelessness, there's lots of things that contribute to that. I would point to issues related to the opiate crisis, mental health issues. We have extreme issues with mental health in the community, with opioid drug addictions, alcohol addictions. There's just a lot of reasons people find themselves in that situation, and it's a compassion kind of a thing. Why are they there? Let's get the wraparound services for those individuals so that they can find a path out of homelessness.
Okay, we just have a couple minutes left, so we can't get into the weeds on this too much, but I know anytime we talk about a funding lack, the conversation goes into property taxes. So what we hear all the time is that property tax system needs to be overhauled, that we need probably an increase in property taxes that, can look at a few different ways. Should homeowners in Washoe County expect to see their property taxes go up?
I would say they're not going to. There's no expectation that property taxes are going to go up. There's a number of reasons why I say that. There's a property tax cap that's been put into place. We are at the $3.66 limit that the legislature put into place several years ago. So looking at property taxes as a funding source to help with homelessness, that's not something that we're looking at. We're looking at federal programs, state programs, other ways to. Certainly, we have lots of nonprofit partners that we have. Those are the areas that we're going to need to be looking into.
Okay, we got about 20 seconds left. Do you have any final message before we go?
So on homelessness, again, I would say it's a very complicated system. There's lots of things that create that. I would point to our youth. Youth homelessness is on the rise. They talk about two things: rent, so the price of rent, and then violence in the home. Violence in their that pushes them into homelessness. That's again one of the things we need to be working on.
Okay, John, thank you so much for your time. I sure appreciate it. Well, that is it for this episode of Face the State. But for more information or to see past episodes, you can just head to our website. That's ktvn.com. Thank you so much for being with us. See you next week.